Our gospel this morning is from the 10th chapter of the book of St. Luke. As they went on their way, Jesus entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. She came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." This is the gospel of our Lord. Let us pray. Gracious Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of each heart here be acceptable in your sight, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, I don't know about you, but there are certain passages in the Bible that just rub me the wrong way. And this story that we have today of Martha and Mary is one of them. My instincts tell me that Mary was being awfully selfish to refuse to help with the work around the house. And Jesus, for his part, he should be grateful that there's this person who welcomes him into her home and works so hard to make him comfortable rather than being impolite to her and chastising her when she complains. You know, if Martha is a bit distracted because she has too much to do, Jesus shouldn't add insult to injury by praising Mary for choosing not to help. Martha's work keeps her from enjoying her guests, while Mary's focus on Jesus is single-minded, devoted to him. You know, the problem with it, it all sounds great, but the problem with it is that somebody had to do the work. And neither Mary nor Lazarus, for that matter, is pitching in. So when Jesus chides Mary for working so hard, I don't see Jesus offering to make the coffee or stir the soup or to check the goat for tenderness. If I had been Martha and Jesus chided me for working so hard, I would have been so tempted to take off my apron and sit down and see how happy everybody would be when their stomachs started growling. This is a troubling text for anyone with a good Midwestern work ethic. So what are we to learn from this? Is God telling us to stop serving? You know, that prayer and Bible study are more important than cooking and serving the Sunday supper? You know? Forget about food drives for the hungry, or feed my starving children, or working for Habitat for Humanity, or just helping out our neighbor next door. Forget all of the things that we do in God's name to make this world a better place, because the most important part of Christianity is contemplation on the Word of God. You know, this seems to be the either-or choice that we are given in the story of Martha and Mary. So what's a good Christian to do? A good Christian who's steeped in the ethics of serving. Well, as with many passages in our Bible, we cannot really, truly understand what's going on in this story unless we look at it in its place in the whole of the Bible. Unless we look at it in its context. It's always dangerous to take passages out of context. So just prior to this visit to Martha and Mary's house, Jesus is asked a question by a legal expert who wants to know exactly what he has to do to inherit eternal life. And Jesus answers his question with a question, and he says, "What does the law say?" And the man says, "There are two relationships in life that are the most important. Love God with all of your heart and soul and strength and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." And then Jesus goes on and tells the story of the Good Samaritan as an example of what it means to live out that second relationship love your neighbor. But the lesson that Jesus is teaching doesn't conclude with the end of the Good Samaritan story. It continues in our story with Mary and Martha. The story of the Good Samaritan and our story today are two parts of a whole. Today's passage is part 2. Jesus is teaching us about the most important relationships in life. And now his teaching, he's done, love your neighbor. And now he's teaching, love God. So Mary is so tuned in to Jesus that she cannot be turned away from him, not by society's demands, not by her sister's anger, not by anything. And Jesus is saying that is what it looks like to love God with complete devotion and focus. To love God with everything that you are, and not just what you do. Now, part of the irony here is that the lawyer had asked what he needed to do to inherit eternal life. And in this story about 2 women, both of whom loved Jesus, Jesus says that all of our efforts and our deeds have to be balanced with times of doing absolutely nothing but sitting and tuning into God. If we are so busy that we can't stop regularly and long enough to listen for God, then our lives will be what Henry Nouwen says, will be full but unfulfilled. Now, if that was a shocking thing for Jesus to say to a woman who was trying to meet the expectations of her society, imagine how crazy it sounds in our society. You know, we live in a world that seems to equate busyness with importance. The busier you are, the more important you must be. In our world, a long to-do list, when it's finally completed, gives us a sense of satisfaction, at least until we make a new to-do list and have to start all over. Our days are full, one after another, of many things, and our minds are full and overflowing, worried and distracted, just like Martha. So much so that we can miss out on the gifts of this present moment. You know, living life controlled by a list of things that we need to get done is like living constantly, at least mentally, in the future. Our minds are just filled with, okay, first I need to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Check, 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 check. So focused are we on what we need to get done that we don't look up and see what's happening now. We do need to hear the message of Mary. It is really, really hard to stop. Maybe you've had that experience the same way that I have. How hard it is. I don't know why. But just to stop for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes and just sit in your prayer chair at home. To just sit and be. You know, Jesus has chosen some unlikely teachers for us. One, a hated Samaritan, and the other, a lowly woman. He didn't pick a respected Pharisee or lawyer or an authoritative expert or a great prophet. He chose a Samaritan and a woman to teach us that life is about being and doing. Too much doing leads to burnout and emptiness, and too much contemplation leaves the world unaffected by God's grace. The point of these 2 stories together is that it's not being or doing, it's being and doing that makes life fulfilling. That's the twist in these 2 stories from Luke. You know, when the lawyer asked about eternal life, it's easy to think of doing whatever we need to do to earn eternal life, to earn our salvation, so that someday we can be in heaven when we die. And what Jesus wants us to understand is that God's promises are being fulfilled now. We can taste and feel and experience the promises in our lives now. In the words of one of my favorite preachers, Barbara Brown Taylor, She says, to hear Jesus talk about it, eternal life means hitting the jackpot now. Eternal life means enjoying a depth and breadth and sweetness of life that is available right this minute, and not only after we breathe our last. So hear what Jesus is saying. Really listen. Tune in. Love God with your whole heart and soul and strength and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And live, not just for eternity, really, truly, fully live now in this moment. Tune in. Our prayer time is a time for letting go of the things we don't need that weigh us down. We let go of regret, unburdening our hearts. We remember the promise that God will never abandon us, no matter what. We let go of worry about the things we cannot control, giving it all to our loving God who holds us close. In a moment, we will begin with some silence. And it's okay to not try to find words to fill that silence in your head. It's okay if your thoughts won't quiet down. Just find a stillness. Perhaps calling your attention to your feet on the floor, or your hands in your lap, or your breath in and out. There is nothing expected of you now. There is nowhere to go, nowhere to be. This stillness, this being is enough.
Peace Touch with the big picture and what's important. Forgive us for the times when we've lived to work rather than work to live. Forgive us. Help us to be truly present to you, O God. Help us be mindful that our connection to you exists right here in the present. Putting off time to tune into you right now robs us of the peace and assurance you have to give.
In this moment, we hear your promise. I am with you always. It is never too late to make better choices.
You do not ask us to give up our work, but you invite us to simply pay attention. We are your children, and we want to dwell with you. We bring you our petitions to you today, O God. Join us now with the Lord's Prayer.